Imagine a human being so dependent on attention that your silence feels like you unplugged their oxygen. That's what happens when you stop reacting. The lights go out in their world, and what happens next is not random. It's not emotional. It's strategic. Their next move will feel personal, but it's actually a predictable psychological mechanism that you can map and neutralize. If you're learning something right now, pause and comment. Silence is strength. Because once you say those words out loud, your brain starts to believe them. And if you want more tools to win the psychological game, subscribe. This is your training ground. Silence is a behavioral weapon because it targets the exact system a narcissistic mind relies on to function: external regulation. Their identity isn't scaffolded internally the way most people's identities are. They don't self soothe, they self source. They need a constant loop of reactions, signals, emotional pulses from others to confirm they matter, that they have weight in the room, that they're still in control of the script. Your silence is not a lack of response, it's the interruption of a behavioral economy. Think of attention like currency. Every word you speak, every explanation you offer, every emotional expression you leak is a payment into their system. It feeds the machine. When you go silent, it's not just withholding words, it's shutting off the supply chain. They can't metabolize silence. It offers no usable data. They can't pivot, they can't manipulate, they can't reframe. Silence forces them to navigate without the feedback cues they need to steer the interaction. They don't know if their tactics are failing. They don't know where your boundaries are. They don't know how to reassert dominance. And that uncertainty is where their mask begins to glitch. Silence removes fuel and replaces it with ambiguity. And ambiguity is the thing their nervous system cannot digest. It triggers a scramble, probing questions, sudden affection, manufactured crises, accusations designed to make you break and react. They're looking for any spark of emotional electricity to latch onto. This is why silence feels like power from the inside. You're not attacking, you're not defending, you're not performing. You're disrupting. You're stepping out of the psychological contract they built without your consent. Silence is an action, not an absence. It's the behavioral equivalent of dropping the rope in a tug of war and watching the other person fall forward under the weight of their own momentum. Silence says, I'm no longer available as your resource. It's a declaration issued without sound, and it forces the other person to face the consequences of a world where they do not get to script your reactions or regulate their identity through your emotions. Their brain treats silence like an emergency because, at a neurological level, control is their oxygen. When the expected behavioral pattern breaks, their threat detection system lights up. It's not dramatic on the outside at first, it's subtle, internal, a destabilization that feels like falling without being touched. They depend on prediction. They need to know where you'll stand, how you'll respond, what emotional levers will still work. Silence erases the map. They can't locate you on their internal radar. They can't calculate the next move because the data stream has collapsed. This is why silence doesn't feel neutral to them. It feels hostile. It feels like you detonated the bridge they were walking across. They need feedback loops to maintain dominance, and without them, they start compensating. The brain shifts into survival logic: fight, flight, fawn, or fabricate. Fight looks like rage, demands interrogation. Flight looks like withdrawal, ghosting, disappearing to make you chase. Fawn looks like sudden sweetness, apologies, calculated vulnerability designed to lure you back into engagement. Fabricate is the wild card. Invented emergencies, invented stories, invented emotional stakes that drag you into a reactive state. Everyone is an adaptive strategy to restore the loop. They're not thinking, I must regain control consciously. It's instinctive, trained by years of conditioning. You break the pattern, their system tries to repair it. Silence becomes a signal that you are no longer programmable, and that's when the scramble begins. They might test you with microaggressions, poke at old wounds, resurrect inside jokes, mirror your language, or deploy nostalgia like a weapon. They'll speak in half sentences, wait for you to fill the gaps because filling the gaps is a reaction. Silence turns the spotlight back on them and they hate the glare. It exposes the emptiness beneath performance. It forces them to confront the possibility that they don't dictate the emotional climate anymore. And when control is identity, losing control means losing themselves. Silence creates a psychological vacuum, and they rush to fill it, not because they miss you, but because they miss who they were when you were reactive. You aren't ignoring them. You're severing the psychological contract they built without ever stating it out loud. That contract is the invisible agreement that your emotions are accessible to them. Your reactions are negotiable, and your attention is a resource they can claim on demand. Most people don't notice when this contract forms. It happens in micro moments. You explain yourself when you didn't need to. You apologize just to keep the peace. You respond to bait because silence felt rude. You take responsibility for their discomfort because it felt easier than watching them spiral. Over time, the contract becomes a script, and you become an actor in a play you never auditioned for. Every reaction reinforces it, even defending yourself reinforces it. They don't hear you correcting them, they see you engaging. And engagement is confirmation that the contract still holds. When you refuse to break the silence, you aren't being cold or petty. You're stepping off the stage. You're declining the role. You are no longer a character in their narrative. Silence communicates a boundary that words can't because words invite negotiation. Silence ends the negotiation. They'll say you're being dramatic, but what's actually happening is that you're removing their reflection. You're unplugging the mirror they use to confirm who they are. Without your responses, they can't fine-tune their persona. They can't decide if they should be the savior, the victim, the martyr, or the villain. Your silence removes the cue that tells them which mask to wear. And that's the moment the contract collapses. They'll feel it before they understand it. The destabilization, the imbalance, the sense that something is off. They might lash out, or they might try kindness as bait, but the engine behind both is the same. Restore the contract. Silence proves that your empathy is no longer collateral. It proves that access is not guaranteed. It shows that your emotional state is no longer in their jurisdiction. That's the shift they never expected. That's the contract they never wanted torn up. Expect pattern interrupt attacks because silence scrambles their playbook. And when someone relies on predictable responses to maintain psychological leverage, unpredictability feels like danger. They don't escalate at random. They escalate with purpose. The moment you stop reacting, you trigger a chain reaction of tactics designed to snap you back into the familiar rhythm where they speak and you respond, where they provoke and you explain, where they accuse and you defend. Love bombing isn't affection, it's reconnaissance. It's the soft knock on the door to see if you'll open it. Sudden compliments, nostalgia, unexpected apologies, promises of change. Each one is bait, an invitation to break silence so they can reinsert the hook. If that fails, guilt grenades are next. They'll remind you of what they did for you, twist history, play the misunderstood soul. Guilt is emotional gravity, and they count on it to pull you back in. When guilt doesn't work, rage enters like a storm. Raised voices, slammed doors, accusations, character assassination. It's not anger, it's theater engineered to provoke. If rage doesn't land, expect the smear campaign. They'll start telling others their curated version of the story, usually positioning themselves as the noble victim who tried everything. This isn't about reputation, it's a pressure tactic. They hope the social tension will make you break silence just to defend your name. There's also the sudden affection, the rewind to the beginning, humor, charm, inside jokes, the old intimacy. It's not a return to connection, it's a return to conditioning. Each pattern interrupt is a lever, and they're checking which ones still move you. Silence exposes which tools are useless, and that's why the tactics feel so frantic, like someone cycling through locks, trying to find the right key. You'll see the switches, the costume changes, the emotional shape-shifting that once felt confusing now revealing itself as method. When the usual strategies don't work, the shock isn't in their aggression or their sweetness. It's in the realization that every move has been about control, not connection. And your silence is the first moment they can't script. Silence forces them to confront the mirror, and that mirror has nothing in it without your reflection. Most people build identity from the inside out. Values, memories, self-awareness, an internal compass that stabilizes them. But someone who relies on external regulation builds identity like a hologram. It only exists when someone else is looking. They need applause to feel admirable, arguments to feel powerful, sympathy to feel meaningful. They're not searching for connection. They're searching for confirmation. You've been the confirmation. Every time you reacted, whether you were angry, apologizing, comforting, explaining, you were holding up the mirror that showed them who they believed they were. Your silence takes the mirror away. There's no reflection, no confirmation, no emotional coordinates to navigate from. And that's when the mask slips, not because they decide to drop it, but because it becomes too heavy to hold without support. They'll start scanning for cues. They'll watch your tone, your posture, your presence. They'll send messages that are less about content and more about sonar, pings in the dark, trying to locate themselves through you. Without feedback, they lose the ability to calibrate. The charm has no target. The anger has no anchor. The guilt has no landing strip. It's like a performer on stage delivering lines to an empty theater. Without an audience, the performance collapses under its own weight. Silence forces them inward, and inward is a place they don't know how to live. Inside, the questions get loud. Who am I if I can't influence you? What am I without your reactions? They don't ask these out loud, but their behavior becomes the answer. It's not that they don't have a self, it's that their self isn't built to stand alone. So they'll try to rebuild it using you, like someone tapping a microphone to see if it's still on. A compliment here, a provocation there, a memory dropped like bait. They're looking for proof that they still exist in the emotional space you once shared. Silence denies that proof. It doesn't destroy them. It just returns them to themselves. And that's the one place they never wanted to be alone. Their next moves are predictable once you recognize the OA control loop cycle, because what feels like chaos from the outside is actually structure. It's a sequence of behaviors designed to restore emotional equilibrium in their favor. Think of it like a circuit they keep trying to close. Stimulus, reaction, reinforcement. When you refuse to react, the current stops, and they start cycling through tactics to get the electricity flowing again. They'll start with low intensity probes, small comments, indirect messages, social media hints, questions that sound harmless but are actually tests. They're checking if the old routes still work. When those fail, they escalate into psychological shortcuts: provocation, guilt, leverage, admiration. Each one isn't a choice, it's a reflex. They've used these patterns for so long that they feel like truth, not strategy. Once you see the cycle, you'll notice the rhythm. It often begins with idealization. Not necessarily love bombing, but the suggestion of a reset. Invitations to talk, reflections on good times, a soft tone that implies reconciliation. When that